I think we should be calling hurricanes now after oil companies. I think instead of naming them after perfectly innocent young women, I mean, everybody named Sandy in New York is going to have to be the butt of bad jokes now for 15 years, you know. Instead, we should have been Hurricane Exxon, you know. And that way, when CNN was covering it, they'd be like, Exxon is coming ashore on the coast of New Jersey at this hour, dealing death and destruction in its path. We are going after the fossil fuel industry. This is the next great moral challenge of our time. We need the same tools to bring pressure on the corporations. The point of doing the tour is to spark endless campaigns. 100 campuses with active divestment movements on them. We've already won 2. Unity College and Hampshire College have both agreed no more investments in fossil fuels. Sold out every single show. I mean, some of them in 3,000-seat venues.
I've traveled in the Arctic and the polar regions for 50 years. Every region that I've crossed has either changed or has disappeared. Last summer, 2/3 of the sea ice on the Arctic Ocean disintegrated. The last 1/3 is hanging on by a thread. Last summer, for the first time, we had a thaw right to the very top of the Greenland ice cap.
We really actually should not have to be here tonight. I mean, it was 25 years ago now that our scientists all said the worst thing on Earth is starting to happen and you better do something about it. Our most important climatologist, Jim Hansen, had written a paper saying those tar sands in Canada are the second biggest pool of carbon on Earth. If you burn it, and here he was using language that should have been simple enough even for politicians to understand, he said, if you burn it, it will be game over for the climate.
We were walking in oil in our rivers. You guys gave us chaps to walk in to clean up our river system. They didn't even have equipment. The egregious crimes that are committed by these companies. They're rogue. They're rogue in their behavior, and they've been rogue in their behavior for a long time.
They're not outlaw against the laws of the state. They get to write the laws of the state most of the time. But they are outlaw against the laws of physics. So far, we've burned enough coal and oil and gas to raise the temperature of the Earth 1 degree. Now, 1 degree doesn't sound like that much, but it turns out that it's an awful lot. If Neil Armstrong were looking down from the moon today, there'd be half as much ice as there was. We have taken, in other words, one of the great physical features on Earth, and we have broken it. 2 degrees would be too much to warm. 1 degree melted the Arctic. We really don't want to find out what 2 degrees does. Okay? But it is the one thing that the world's governments have ever agreed on about climate change. Nothing else. The only thing they've done is promise we won't go past that line. 565 gigatons of carbon. 565 billion tons. That's how much the scientists tell us that we can pour into the atmosphere and have some hope of staying below that 2 degree line. A team of financial analysts in the UK who a couple of years ago set themselves the task of figuring out how much carbon the world's fossil fuel companies and the countries that kind of operate like fossil fuel companies, think Venezuela or something, how much they had in their reserves. When they added the whole thing up, it came to 2,795 gigatons, 5 times as much as the most conservative government on the planet thinks would be safe to burn. Sandy roared up the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now that was a different storm than we have ever seen before. We have never seen barometric pressures that low north of Cape Hatteras. We've never measured a storm that big at its height. The tropical storm force winds stretched out 1,040 miles in either direction. To watch the cold Atlantic filling up the subway tunnels of New York was to recognize how fragile the human enterprise is becoming, how close to the edge we really are. All of a sudden, like the canyons of Manhattan were filled with water. To me, the most significant outcome of Sandy in political terms was the headline on the front of that radical rag Business Week, you know, 3 or 4 days later. Just said, it's global warming, stupid. Nothing's happened in Washington much for 20 years. And one of the reasons for that is that the fossil fuel industry has way too much power. Tobacco industry doesn't have much power anymore in Washington. People took them down several pegs. These guys are the environmental equivalent of the tobacco industry. The Keystone thing was a great moment. I don't know whether we can hold on to that victory. I think there's every chance that Obama may decide now a year later to approve the damn thing. Going back to Washington in February with a massive demonstration.
As Anishinaabe people, we have this teaching that says this time is called time of the seventh fire. So we had these prophets that came to us a long time ago, and they told us what was going to happen, which is what prophets do. And we listened. We actually listened to ours. And they talked about this time here, and they refer to this as the time of the seventh fire. And they say that we as Anishinaabe people would be faced with two mikana, two roads. One road, they said, was well-worn, but it was scorched. The other road, they said, was not well-worn, and it was green. And it was our choice upon which mikana, which path to embark.
TV reporter was interviewing me the other day and being very, skeptical in the way that reporters should, and he was like, this just seems impossible to me. The odds are much too great. This just seems like one of those David and Goliath stories. And I started to feel discouraged. Yeah, you're right. And then I thought, wait, no. I'm a Methodist Sunday school teacher. I know how this story comes out. David wins.